maybe the most valuable thing first. So operate in the old system for 11 things, new system for one thing. Now you've got like a new piece of functionality to bring to your business. And now we're at 2 things. Now we're at 3 things. And I think after probably about 8 or 9 months, we'd replace the whole thing. And in a way, not that no one noticed, but it was a slow transformation from one thing to another. And I know like the frog boiling in the water thing isn't actually a real thing, but that idea, we did something sort of like one piece at a time instead of the big bang, worked really well. Did that again. When I talk to CEOs, there are usually 3 things they're paying attention to. There's growing top line or margin, there's trying to differentiate in the market, and there's managing risk. Now, on this podcast, we talk about digital transformation a lot. And I think to a lot of CEOs, there's this idea that, well, of course we have to do transformation. That's the thing that everyone's talking about. And yet it kind of feels mostly like a bunch of risk. So a lot of the companies that we work with and that we've talked to are just kicking the can down the road. They're waiting for some kind of easier answer to show up in the future, whether it's AI or whatever the current technology fad of the day is. That's the thing where, oh, maybe it'll happen when that happens. But at the same time, what I want to talk about today is a little bit of like really what the actual problems are, what the real risks are, so you can go about making a better decision about should we actually do this or not. And it's important because when you think about the success rate of digital transformation, there's a Gartner study we quote a lot that says about 72% of them just fail, abject failure. And the main reason is they don't really set out really good goals, but that's not really enough to get your teeth into. Like, what does that mean? Like, they don't really have a goal. And so some of the things when you think about, like, what's the reason like you might be ready to do this? And then how do you get your way through that? That's what I want to talk about. And so when you look at whether or not you're ready, I think about a couple of the clients that we've worked with, and some went really great and some didn't go great. And so maybe those stories might help guide us figuring out what would work or not. The one I'm thinking of had a really old product that the whole company was run on. And when we encountered it, they were at this transformation, kind of inflection point. Like, should we do this or we should not do this? And what seemed like a risk, which was, well, I mean, that'd be kind of a big investment and what we really get out of it. Let's just fix these couple of bugs that we have. And so we get in there and we work on a couple of bugs, and well, we have these other bugs and okay, let's work on those. And a couple of them were kind of like showstopper, like pretty crazy. I don't want to give it away for fear of incriminating somebody, but things where the database relied on something totally unstable, or the way it would scale would never work past about 50 or 55 clients. And they were at that point. And so we just kept making these little incremental improvements. And I think we kind of trickled along for multiple years to the point where I think about 8 years in, they finally decided to invest in the kind of the market had caught up. And so a product existed that was kind of close, didn't do a lot of the things that actually made their company special, if I'm honest, but they decided to move on to a new platform. And their total investment at that time after 8 years was about 40% more than we had suggested investing at the beginning, to just, hey, let's come back a couple steps. Let's look at how your business works. Can we reinvent how this happens to make it even a better product? And so, 8 years later, it's a long time to kind of kick a can down the road. Went to a new product, kind of degraded the customer experience. So customers were used to this kind of really interesting, unique way that they operated. This new platform wouldn't allow them to do that, and had to kind of take a step back and say, well, I guess in a way they managed the risk that moving on to a product that's someone else's problem. But I think they lost probably 8 years of growth and profitability and probably value in the market. If you're looking to sell a business and you're on a platform that everyone else can use, how special are you? Like if you just use Salesforce and everyone else uses Salesforce, that doesn't make you different. But if you have a digital product, you're like, we have this special, unique, hard to duplicate, high cost to entry kind of business model, all of a sudden you've got something pretty compelling that operates at, software multiples in the 20s as opposed to service business in the below 10s, right? So that's one example. Another one we came across was a company that was doing kind of a SaaS model for a platform written in something really, really old, where they were running in trouble was, well, at a certain point, old bad code can only take you so far where each incremental new step costs so much more than you think it should possibly cost because of what what your foundations are. And so almost a similar related story, worked on bug fixes for a little while, made some updates, and everything was just, it's like, it almost was unconscionable how much a feature would cost, because you're thinking to yourself, well, it only has to do X, Y, and Z. Like, shouldn't that be, this reasonable amount of time frame? And we were like, yes, we totally agree. It's exactly how much it should take. However, the fact that this thing is built in this old kind of kludgy technology makes everything harder. You're just kind of, working through the mud the whole time. And so we worked with them for a while. And after about a year and a half, making some pretty good progress, just decided that they'd be better off trying to find a different partner to do it. And I think, the lesson is, again, if, losing a year and a half in the market in this time in the evolution of SaaS products, it's enough time for people to blow you by, right? So if we take a step back and say, can we rethink this business? Can we do this differently? Maybe it'd be more successful. So some of the successes we had all had kind of a strategy in common. So something to bear in mind as you look to modernize tech. And that is, if you look at a way to kind of overtake an application or some old technology, one little piece at a time while reinventing the business, you've got this better shot. So I think of one client where we were able to say, your business is run on this piece of software and it does about a dozen things. So let's take off maybe the most valuable thing first. So operate in the old system for 11 things, new system for one thing. Now you've got like a new piece of functionality to bring to your business. And now we're at 2 things. Now we're at 3 things. And I think after probably about 8 or 9 months, we'd replace the whole thing. And in a way, not that no one noticed, but it was a slow transformation from one thing to another. And I know like the frog boiling in the water thing isn't actually a real thing, but that idea, we did something sort of like one piece at a time instead of the big bang, worked really well. That again, at a really big client, a giant enterprise client that many of us interact with on a daily basis, taking things one piece at a time to redo an infrastructure project where the old infrastructure could only get you as far as 1,000 customers, and they were trying to get to 20 and 50 and 100,000 customers simultaneous. And so kind of looking at that one little piece at a time, re-engineering from the beginning, instead of these little fixes that really, I think there's probably a graph to be made of the incremental cost of investing in old systems eventually has a diminishing returns curve that goes downward. And I think the sooner you step into making it something modern, the better chance you have. And I think, as I've talked about in other podcasts, when you're redesigning, part of what you have to think about is, let's make this a system that lasts, or the concept of the system can last 50 or 100 years, so that, as new technologies come on board, we're able to piece things apart, as opposed to giant monolith that we're never given a chance to recover from. In fact, actually right now we're modernizing something that we built. We built something 7 years ago or so, and the technology that at the time was like, this is the hot technology. This is going to be it. Like, this is, if we're going to put all our chips on something, we're going to invest in this one. And then about a year and a half later, it just wasn't. And that's how technology works. And it's like, oh, that's not a bad choice. But, and then as time goes on, 7 years later, it's like, we should really move into the modern stack. And that's because if you're managing risk, a lot of what you're managing is how you get access to the people to do the work. So, if you're in college, I did Fortran and COBOL like a lot of people, and I haven't seen an active job for that in a while. And maybe they're out there in little niche worlds, but like, that's not a growing technology. If you're going to short a tech, that's the one to think about. It's going to go away eventually. So think about going back to like what a CEO looks at. If you're thinking about, you're trying to create growth, whether top line and EBITDA, or you're also trying to manage, like, how do I make myself different in the market? And then you're trying to manage risk. There's some things that I think that are actual risks. I think most people look at, they jump right to, it's the money. But I think for companies that are successful and growing, money isn't going to be the problem. It's going to be about the time you're going to have to invest and the change you're going to have to make in your company. And so you think about the things that are actual problems. I gravitate to the things that are like, you have to rethink your operations. You're going to have to create operational excellence from transforming. You have to reinvent the business. That's hard. It can be difficult. It can be painful for people. And I think the mistake that a lot of transformations make is they don't actually focus on reorganizing how things could work in a new world. So if you take your old process and just map it to a new system, you will likely fail. If you take an old process and try to make this custom system to do exactly that again, you're really just kind of, you're not taking advantage of the lever that technology will give you. So taking a step back and really looking at operational excellence from the point of view of reorganizing every process that you have, sometimes people thinking about for the first time, what is our process for how we do this? Like, I know that, this person in the organization has always been responsible for X, but like, how do they do that? And like, what are the things that go into that? And if that person goes on vacation, I was like, go on vacation or win a lottery as opposed to hit by a bus. So they're not there anymore to do that work. How are we going to cover for them? How do we, operate still? So your first step of reorganizing the business operationally can be like kind of threatening to people. That's going to be like, that's changed. Maybe my job's changing. I got to say, I've rarely seen the jobs go away. It's most often the case that people end up in a new, honestly, more valuable role, because what can people do? People can do really interesting, authentic, present things with customers, whereas technology is going to get things wrong. Nobody likes talking to AI on the chat or the 800 number. So those are things that people can do. Another thing, so we think about, operational excellence, talked about people, there are going to be new jobs. So part of your transformation is a technology change that necessitates different kinds of jobs in the future. So, your shift from things, your departments that did lots of manual stuff probably get replaced, and they do different things, and they do different things better. And then you think about the culture changing. The reality is you'll lose some people because it doesn't seem like what they want to do anymore. They were comfortable doing things. But I think it's probably a truism to say, if you don't change, you risk dying. So if if the old guard can't get on board with, the future, that may mean there's some self-selecting out. There may be some people really excited about it. I think in general, when we talk to people doing an operational excellence project to look at what are the steps you take now, what's happening with you, there's kind of sometimes a built-in frustration around like, yeah, this is like acknowledging this is crazy. I have to go into this system. I copy this out. I go in this other thing. I copy that out. I put it into like a notepad or, a spreadsheet or something. I make some changes and I paste it back into it. It's crazy, right? And my job is 32 of my 40 hours a week. I am pasting and repasting and reorganizing stuff in these sheets, and I'm not getting anywhere. It feels like I'm not doing anything intelligent. I'm this monkey in the machine doing things that probably we could and should automate. So I feel like people often welcome it if they're people that want the business to succeed. Transformation can take lots of forms. There's software, there's robotics, there's analytics that can kind of come into play. There's making a data-driven organization. But you start with a process, organize yourself around how can we make this better in a new digital world, and you'll be a lot more successful. Now, thinking about how you as a leader manage the risk of this project moving forward, there are a lot of kind of project management principles that come into play that are maybe newer to some organizations. And I think the first one that I mentioned in other conversations is creating a vision first is probably the most important thing to do, because you establish like what the organization is doing. We are doing this. We are moving forward. Here's what we're going to get from it. Never forget the what's in it for me part of the conversation. For most people who will be affected, it's your job gets different and easier and better. This isn't we're not going to make you do more grunt work. That's the promise of technology. It's the idea that, something that could be automated should be automated and allow us to do better work in our other areas of the business, whether it's, sales or customer service or marketing or creating content or all these kind of things that really only people do very well, should be the promise of what the future holds. So starting with a vision, rolling that out, being really consistent about it, that's something that should be like in every all hands, in every town hall, in every email communication that goes out to people that we're doing this. That should be really important. As you're going through it, you've got those internal customers, but you have external customers too. Communicating to them about what's happening, what's coming, getting their input from both internal and external is so important. I think one of the things, you'll hear a lot is when you ask your people in your organization, you ask customers for what they want, they're going to tell you what they see elsewhere. So when you're talking to customers, there's a way that they do business with you that they have done for a very, very long time, but maybe the way they interact with a competitor, they really like. It's, hey, listen, I can do this thing in their app. When I, get an invoice, it's got this number on it that I can use, or when I interact with chat, or I go into the customer portal, or I want to know about an order, or I want to know about, this or that those things are there for them. And again, we've talked about before that people are bringing the expectations of what they interact with every day. Just a minute ago, I'm out of something at the house, and I know I can go to Amazon and I can get a same day delivery. It costs me nothing, whether reasonable or not. I expect that from all the places I interact with. I know my wife sometimes will show me like a website she's trying to deal with. It's like, why would they do this? And it's like, I get it. You get in these ruts where this is just how this system works. And do we want to make an investment on it or not? And people bring those expectations, even if they're not real. or if they're not reasonable, I should say. So then you look at, as your project is progressing, how do you know it's working or not? And I think when you go back to some of the stories I had about some of the successful transformations we had, especially around the modernizing legacy tech, you should be able to see more or less consistent forward progress. So what you don't want to do, like a red flag you can make for yourself is, I haven't heard anything from the transformation team in some number of months, right? That should not be possible. You should be able to see, oh, we're moving ahead on this manageable initiative first. We got to this place. People are testing it. We're working with it. That sort of interaction should happen. I think for management, maybe monthly is probably pretty healthy. You shouldn't have to dive into the details. Your team should probably be meeting weekly or biweekly, semi-weekly, to make sure that things are happening and making kind of incremental progress forward. But you shouldn't be in a black hole that sucks all your time and energy and people into it, and no one ever comes out of it. Take a manageable chunk of work to do, get it done, and get it out. So now looking at, once things are starting to come out into the world, you're actually in a part of a brand new company. Things have been changed. There's a new way of operating. And the key here is to not look at the launch as we did it, mission accomplished, plant the flag, we're done. You're now in a more or less permanent culture of innovation and change. And so the organizations that are going to be successful are the ones that get the product out there. And now because digital, if you buy a machine like for your plant, it's more or less that machine, right? And it can do some different things, and you can program it to do some different stuff. But that's pretty much what it does. But with technology change, there's always something to consider. So, for example, the hot topic now is going to be, how do we plug AI into the system? And virtually every product, if you watch the ads of any product you're a part of right now, and even though I was watching TV ads recently, every product is going to have some kind of AI twist on it. I feel like, what did I see the yesterday or today? But you're going to start to see that everything is going to be AI enabled. If you're a Salesforce user, there's going to be a component that does that. Oh, we have a client that's investing in Sage as an ERP, and they've got an AI component. Probably going a sidebar about that. Like, are those companies going to be the best suited to keep up with it? Maybe. Seems like we're in an AI revolution right now, where the cutting edge is going to be those products that are like strictly AI, and that further down the path, someone like, I'm not done picking on Salesforce, some big product is going to pick up on here's a thing that works that maybe probably someone else developed, and then we're plugging into our system. So they'll be slower to adapt, right? But maybe it's a little more for those risk averse people, that's maybe a little safer. But now, if you're in this culture of innovation and change post your innovation launch, you're getting feedback about, okay, we changed how we do invoicing. How's that working? Oh, the promise of being able to get these in and out to customers is great, but we ran into a snag because it turns out that our EDI customers expected something different. Oh, great, now we have an interaction with that. But other customers they're able to log into the portal and see their invoices. Everybody's happy, and we added different ways to pay and all these kind of things, all these new modern kind of systems. And so all those things are going to be really great. So if you kind of dial all the way back to the beginning, you're creating this loop that starts where you started the first time. So now we've got a new process that we can evaluate, take a step back from, figure out a way to have technology enable how to do it differently. Now you're on the constant wheel toward progress. Now, the place I didn't touch were kind of the perils of not doing it is, especially if you've got legacy systems, that there is kind of a tendency I've seen to stick with legacy systems until not just like the wheels are falling off, but like the hubcaps are grinding on the pavement, and we're sliding around, and there's no choice left but to do this, right? And the problem is, the longer you go, the harder it is to make those changes. And just my own experience on legacy systems, the more monolithic and outdated they are, the harder they are to integrate with anything. So modern things are expecting APIs, and even like XML from 5-10 years ago. Old systems might not even have any of that. And so the farther you go from the last time someone thought about that system, the more likely it is you've got siloed data, things don't talk to themselves, you're not flowing things across to get any sort of data picture of the organization, and you're getting higher and higher maintenance costs because it's harder to keep this thing alive. But also, when you think about trying to find people to go do Fortran and COBOL, some of them are retiring. I feel like I have a client story from the last couple of years where someone had to be hired off the golf course to come in and make a change to something because he was the last one that touched it, and it had been like 12 years. So that's a big risk. So again, if we're managing risk, that's a place you can get stuck. If you've got, problems with customer service or customer experience, it's really hard to deliver a united omni-channel experience to a customer when you've got outdated legacy systems. You can't personalize anything. You can't, meet evolving customer demands. It's really hard. And further, with data in silos, you can't really use analytics to do anything intelligent for the business across all your channels, right? Another problem people experience in a world of lack of transformation is it gets harder and harder to attract talent, both on just like the normal, the normal roles. Not by normal roles, I mean like non-technology roles. So in a non-technology role, if you come into a business and like you're used to having all these tools and access to data and everything, and now it's like, oh, here's how we do this here, and it's all, to exaggerate, it's spreadsheets and faxes, and they're comparing other jobs, it might be pretty hard to land them, to be honest. And then you think about, how do you hire technology talent if you're trying to plot a course toward transformation? How do you hire technology talent when what you sell them on is, oh yeah, I know you studied all this stuff in school and you've been working on all the latest whatever, but we're going to take you back to 97 on our platform and make you work in something that isn't really exciting. Just from my own experience, finding and hiring and developing and keeping technology talent is hard. And you got to give them big, meaty projects that they want to have fun sticking their teeth into, or you're not going to be able to keep them. And then you've got a problem with scaling. Imagine trying to scale a business with all these problems we just mentioned. Legacy can't take advantage of all these modern scaling things with the cloud and all. I was about to get nerdy. All the technologies that allow you to operate by clicking buttons and even automatically everything scale up and scale down. It's not ready to do that. And frankly, you create more risk because you're in a place where if things go down, you've got that call the guy in the golf cart situation, and maybe he's decided to stop taking calls, or maybe it's 5 a.m. in Tucson and he doesn't want to do it. So like these are considerations that you're going to run into. Think about where the value of transformation is. And going back to the core, I think the core CEO responsibilities, driving top line and margin, differentiating the market and managing risk. I think it's clear that technology, digital transformation can drive top line with being able to reach more people better, easily scale, all that kind of stuff. It can reduce costs and create margin advantage for you by making things easier, scale with less people, offer different and better customer experience to be able to self-manage, all that kind of stuff. And the problem is, how risky is it, right? And I think the longer time goes here, the more cans are kicked down the road. The risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of you got to jump in and eventually try something, or you're going to be stuck forever. So if you like that content, like and subscribe to hear more, and I'll see you on the next podcast.